Hello and be welcome to a very first episode of my next Let's Develop season, which will be about software project management. Here at my side, this is Ben, a colleague of mine who has done a considerable amount of project management before. And throughout the next episodes, we want to talk about different aspects of program management and how those play together with the development practices and methods that I've been presenting throughout the other seasons I'm doing and will be presenting in the future. So, welcome Ben, nice to have you on the show.
Hi Sven.
So what's our motivation to do this? Why do we want to talk about project management?
Well, I think first and foremost you want to give your viewers a little bit more of a broader context why they should use the methods you present, like test-driven development or whatnot. So what's the motivation for that? And I think everyone who has spent his time working together with another person has sooner or later come to the conclusion that just working on a thing isn't just enough.
Okay, so this already gets us started to our first point. So project management, when do we need project management? Do we need project management when I start working alone at home in my quiet chamber, or do I need project management when I'm working with, say, 10 people on a project team, or where does it start?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes you can just go along and do for yourself because you have everything in your head and you don't need to plan. But sooner or later, as your project evolves, you might want to have a list of the things you want to take care about, where you don't keep everything in your head, and this is where project management starts.
Okay.
And of course it starts when you work together with another person, because you need to communicate and you need to arrange that you do certain stuff and so on and so on. And of course with 10 people you need a certain amount of project management, because otherwise it
probably already earlier, right?
Much earlier.
So what's project management about? What are we going to do, or what's part of project management?
That depends a little bit on your view. There have been a lot of people working on that, defining what project management is. But basically, it boils down to four basic activities.
Okay.
Yeah, that's you need to plan,
Mm-hmm.
you need to organize, you need to motivate, and of course you need to have some amount of control over what you do. So that's plan, organize, motivate, and control. These are the four basic activities, and everything you find out there in the literature addresses at least one of those things, sometimes even more.
Okay.
Sometimes even more. The good frameworks you see out there kind of capture all of those.
Okay. So the idea is to pick one framework that's out there and has all these things inside, and then I just use it, and that's my project management.
You could do that, but you probably will fail. But you need to.
So then I don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Project management is hopefully about not failing.
No. Actually, project management is a lot about failing, because you need to learn from your failures. That's to a certain degree. That's the thing project management is about. Also, it's kind of to prevent failure, but also it kind of has to give you a frame where failure can happen and where failure is okay, but also where you need to learn from your failures and be better next time.
Which means that, like in test-driven development, I want to have a small feedback cycle in my management so that I can see error, see failure, and react to it.
Let's not call it small. Let's call it. You want to have a feedback cycle. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of the first thing where everybody fails.
It should be small. That should be the goal, right? I want to have fast feedback also in management.
Yeah, you want to have fast, but you want to be kind of notified early on when
it's
something.
Probably not test-driven development every second.
No,
at least say every week, every month. I want to have some feedback to a certain amount, so that I can adjust my project management.
Yeah, it depends on what you do. It depends on what you do, basically. And kind of, the smaller the feedback cycles you are, the more ability you have to learn. But sometimes certain things develop over time, so you also have to have a broader view. That depends. That depends. But I think we'll come to that in a later discussion.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so you already mentioned that we have these 4 general activities, which are plan, organize, motivate, and control, right?
Yep, that's right.
So how about we go over them one by one and just give a short idea about what these things are about, and also to point at possible topics we could tackle in later episodes.
Yeah.
So first thing is planning. What's planning about?
Yeah, planning is about, first of all, when you plan, you need to know about kind of what limits you, what are your constraints. Because you don't work in open space, usually you have constraints, like you need to be finished in a certain amount of time, or you have a certain scope in your project that you want to cover, so your, let's say, your logging framework doesn't need to do extensive mathematical computations, of course, hopefully. Sometimes you have a budget. Sometimes you have a budget. In commercial situations, you also have that, and you want to have kind of to know, okay, do we spend €1 million, or can we spend 10 million euros or 10 billion? That's a difference, of course.
Yes, it certainly is.
And the last thing you need to know is about your people. The people you have in your project. I wouldn't call them a constraint per se, but kind of the number of people you have limits what you can do in a certain amount of time, and the skill level of the people also constrain you in a bit. If you have a database application and no one in your team knows about how to program a database, you are in a lot of trouble, of course.
But to make that clear, when you say the number of people restrains what you can do, that does not mean that more people can solve more work in the same amount of time necessarily.
Not necessarily.
There's always more constraints than just number of people. Right?
I think we will come to team building a lot later and so on and so on when we come to the motivation part. But this is something you need to know about. And also when you are a little bit more advanced in the topic, you can push those limits. You can push those constraints a little bit ahead. So you can ask for more time, kind of limit your scope. You can work with these things, but first of all, you need to know where they currently are, and where this will go. And if you're advanced, as I said, you can push it a little bit.
Okay.
You can
adjust it. So part of planning is sitting down and like building a list of all the constraints I have and. But judging what's the most important constraints, what the less important constraints.
Talking to all the necessary people to kind of find out about these constraints is a part of planning. It's the thing you need to do in advance, because when you plan, you want to make sure that none of these constraints limit you. Okay. So you need to plan inside of those constraints to do kind of a decent planning, to do a realistic planning. Yeah. Okay, so you can do planning like we can do all of the features like in 1 week. You could plan like this, but it wouldn't be reasonable, of course, because this is not your budget, and your people probably wouldn't do that.
So this requires that to put your finger on the requirements you have, you need to talk to all the stakeholders involved, to management, to the developers probably, to the customer, to whatever other person involved in the project, administration, or your Scrum Master if you have one. Or
the people that pay your bills and the people that give you those bills.
They have some kind of constraints on the project.
Of course,
I can see that.
Of course.
So
sometimes there is a customer.
Yeah, the customers are important because they somehow at least implicitly pay your bill.
Yes, at the end of the day.
Okay, so maybe some words about when do I plan?
Of course, in the beginning. Everybody plans in the beginning of a project because you need to make some.
I need to have an idea of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do.
You want to have a roadmap where to go and actually what to do on the next day when you don't plan anything. But the world revolves, and it sometimes revolves around under your feet.
It certainly does.
And it revolves when you sleep and when you eat and when you don't work on the project. So certain things might change. Your constraints will change over time. Your project scope will change. Sometimes a thing that your customer finds interesting in 1 week will be totally uninteresting in the next week. So you need to be aware of those changes. And this, of course, affects your plan. Because you need to adjust them. You need to adjust your plan to the changing environment, to the changing constraints of your project, and this is something that is reoccurring, sometimes even daily. So you need to be aware when to change your plan, because going on a journey with a plan that is kind of last week gets you kind of where you wanted to go last week.
Yeah, sure. That sounds reasonable.
Adjust your plan.
So the question is that I often see in like project management forums, like on Stack Exchange, project management. Is project management planning a full-time job? Do you need a specific person for the planning task, or is that something like one of the developers can do as a side job with whatever 1 hour a day, or
That depends. That largely depends on the size of your project. If you have a project like with 100 people and many subgroups involved and many constraints between those subgroups and relationships and dependencies and so on, you need to have a person that is kind of responsible to be aware of those dependencies and those things. And sometimes in things like that, in projects of this size, you see people dedicated to that job. Okay. Really dedicating 100% of the time just for project management. And sometimes you have teams for that, project management teams. Okay.
That's when it gets really big.
Yeah, of course. But you have those. You
need to manage the management.
Yeah, you have those kinds of projects, and you need to kind of see that the overall goal is not lost in kind of the components. But this is something for very much later. Let's limit to a little bit of a smaller scope.
I just want to point out some things that our discussions might later cover.
In a smaller scope, you don't need to spend all of your time planning. This wouldn't probably be reasonable, let's say. But it's sometimes a good thing to kind of pin that job to one specific person, so you know who's responsible for that, or at least who's responsible for delegating that job. So you have kind of the one person to go to when you need to adjust the plan, when you have questions about the plan.
So this is just you need somebody who's responsible for doing the job, or maybe multiple people, but everybody needs to know who's responsible for the plan.
Yeah,
makes sense.
That's right.
Yeah, I think we agreed that we're going to talk about more specific project management frameworks like XP or Scrum throughout the next episodes. So I guess then we have time to also look at the amount of planning that is done in these frameworks and how that actually works out.
Yeah, we should keep it practical.
So maybe we jump on to the next of our 4 activities, which is organize.
Yeah.
What's part of that?
Yeah, the first thing people ask about when we come to the organize point is always, how is that different from planning? Didn't I do that already?
It sounds like an obvious question.
Yeah,
right?
It's an obvious question. It's a very valid question. But with organization in a way, you don't mean the same thing with planning. In the organized part of a project management, it's kind of where it comes to the real practical questions, where you give people the ability to work at all, that they have kind of a desk and a chair and a computer and so on and so on. You need to take care of these things, and sometimes all the different activities of your project management require that you have certain documents ready, certain things ready, and so on and so on. It's kind of the daily work. It's the daily administrative work that comes a little bit on top, depending on your process, and you obviously need to have things like you need to want to keep track on what you already did and what you plan to do next time and so on. This is part of the organizing part. There are certain a lot of practices out there. Some are better for the one thing, some are better for the other thing. I think we'll come to that in later episodes. And obviously when we come to XP and Scrum, we will talk about these kind of things. But these are kind of, you can see it as your tool set, as your daily tool set that needs to be kind of on your desk, ready to work.
Okay, but I mean that doesn't mean I have to do everything in advance, right?
No.
If I take, for example, our more or less spontaneous session right now, I mean, of course we needed something to put our camera on, and we needed something to read our text from and to record our voices, but it was a bit spontaneously, and maybe I post a picture of our improvised studio later on, then you guys see what we're currently talking about.
Really great.
So this was perfect organization. maybe for the next time we remember how to do it, and it's going to be a bit more professional. But
Oh,
we'll see. Okay.
Whatever works. It's the same thing in project management. Whatever works.
That's right. Anything else to say about organizing?
No, I think we come into the practical, because such a practical point. I think we will handle that in the practical
makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's go to the third point, which is motivation.
Oh yeah, this is usually hugely overlooked most of the time. Kind of to motivate the people to actually do the work is kind of a work step in itself. That's something some people don't understand. So people just assume that the people they work with are intrinsically motivated to work on that.
Sure, that's not when we start a new project, so everybody's motivated, right?
Not in any case, not in every case. Sometimes you have projects that you are not very, that you don't care so much about, that you are not very motivated to do at the first time, and later on it gets more interesting. But sometimes it's just work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
of course.
And sometimes you have people that can work very good together, and sometimes people have some tensions between each other. That's human. That's normal.
Oh my God, we have to work with testers.
Oh God,
yeah.
they find all those things. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it is like this.
They make me work, and they complain if I don't do my work right.
That's
how dare they?
That's tough. Anyway. That's tough. Yeah. But usually when people come together to work, it's not like they find each other naturally. So they follow kind of a pattern. This is what in the organizational theory Bruce Tuckman called the 4 stages of group development.
Okay.
So when a group comes together, it just isn't like that they come into a room and work in high performance speed, or the best to their best effort possible, like from the very beginning.
I mean, that's why we have team building, right?
Yeah, that's team building, and this goes through 4 certain phases. The first thing is forming, which says like, okay, we basically accept each other, and in the first stage we avoid conflict. We just kind of get to know each other and kind of see and
so
probe.
everybody's on the safe side.
Yeah, everybody's on the safe side.
Being careful with everybody else.
Everybody keeps probing, very, very formal, very distanced language, of course. Like, Sven, would you mind opening the window? Something like this. Yeah, this is kind of forming, because I don't know how you will react to my request, and if you accept my request at all, or something like that. So I probe a little bit. This is kind of the first step. And then when we have this kind of initial trust, the storming phase kicks in. Yeah, it's like, storming, it's like, oof, yeah, conflict. And it's a little bit like that. Because you with a trust that you kind of gain through probing and finding out about each other, you are more self-conscious to kind of express your discomfort with certain things, like, oh, no, actually, I don't want you to open that window. It's much too cold already in here. Something like that. Yeah. So you can talk a little bit more openly about your discontent with certain things, and you also kind of invites a little bit of a kind of a challenge. So most of
I mean, if everybody like says what he thinks and what he really wants, then you have conflict every now and then.
Actually, many teams are in their storming phase and they don't leave it at all. And it kind of is a little bit. It is challenging but productive. But this is kind of the teams where you have a lot of rotation. Because people don't.
It's exhaustive, right?
Yeah, it's exhaustive. You have a lot of rotation. People get out of the project, new people come in. They kind of start the forming phase again, go easily to the storming phase, and
then stuck there.
The next advancement level kind of a group, or next stage of this group development is called norming. And this is when kind of the group comes a little bit together, forms kind of a mutual goal that is not really explicit, but kind of implicitly through the actions of each other's people. And also this is when shared responsibility begins. When you go to a group and say, oh, you did a mistake there, this is kind of, with teams in the norming phase, you don't have the finger pointing anymore. You don't have like, oh, this was his feature. He did that wrong. Yeah, this is not the case.
So you say we have a problem there.
We have a problem.
How do we fix it?
And we fix it together.
This sounds a lot like retrospective meetings from Scrum, like talking about the team, the process, things that went right, things that went wrong, and like finding the right way to go for the whole team.
Yeah, we will come later when we talk about the certain processes. We will see how actually the activities in these process frameworks actually help you to advance in your stages of group development.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain practices like the retrospective in Scrum that you said that actually push this a little bit forward and push people to the norming phase, and also to the next phase, which is called performing.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
that's where I want to be.
This is where you want to be. This is kind of the high throughput. Everything is clear. You have a mutual goal. You have a mutual set of rules you all adhere to, and you just go and work. You just work. You just do this.
When you're in the flow, when things are running smoothly, and everything just works.
But like it is with things that run smoothly, slight change, and everything falls apart.
Okay, which essentially means that these 4 phases are not like you go from one to the next and then you stay in the last one, but it's like changing. You'll reset that you can get stuck in the second phase, and that when new people join the project, for example, you start over again. Yeah. So this is really a constant evolvement, and you have to work on that every day, all the time.
Yes, that's
to stay in the performing state as much as possible, right?
Let's say when you are have a good performing team, and the person who does the project management gets replaced from the organizational level for whatever reason by another person, you can't simply assume that team will stay in this stage of performing. It probably won't, because the new person does not know about the rules, about the norms, about the mutual goals. So you have to start over.
Has to get to know the team. Team has to get to know the new manager, and
you don't need to take the certain amount of time that you had before. It probably will go fast. It can go faster for good teams, but sometimes it even may break apart. So this is something that we might come to later. When it comes to leadership, this can play an important role here. So kind of the things in leadership are very important here. We may cover that, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Which brings us actually to the 4th of our 4 activities, which is control. Mm-hmm. So this kind of sounds like the management activity per se, going around controlling what people do and what people don't do, and then punish them for their mistakes, right?
Yeah, don't go around and don't be a punishing manager. That didn't work out so well.
There we are pointing fingers again.
Yeah, we are pointing fingers. You don't help your team by pointing out who did it wrong, because they actually already know through all the technical means. I think you explained something like version control already and testing and so on. So you know who breaks your build.
Yeah, there's going to be some episodes about build management systems and build servers in the near future. So that's a perfect situation where people start pointing at each other. Yeah. Oh, you broke the build. It's good. Your test failed. It's a red build. It's your fault.
Yeah.
You're going to be in hell forever.
In some version control managements, they actually call that feature blame.
Yeah,
I think it's in Subversion. I don't know.
Subversion has a blame feature. I don't know. Git may have the same thing.
Yeah, but they call it differently, which is good because you don't want to assign blame. You want to.
I even remember now that you speak of it. It's not a version control system, but we had a project management tool a while ago that we used for a university project, and there was a punishment dashboard where you could actually configure the unit of punishment. So. Somebody configured it for get beaten with a stick, and you could increase the number of beats you get.
And so, why this is a bad idea? Yeah, this is a bad idea. Kids don't do this at home. And why this is a bad idea, we also may cover. Okay.
Sounds like an interesting topic for an upcoming episode.
Yeah, blame and punishment. We should do that.
Now that we talked about what control is not supposed to be, let's talk a bit about what control is supposed to be.
First of all, you need to be aware that you are you cannot control what you cannot measure. Is kind of the basic rule of thumb. So a thing that is just kind of your gut feeling is hard to control. Mm-hmm. So control is not about making you feel good about the project. It's about knowing that you are on the right track.
So we're on the feedback feedback idea here.
Yeah, and we're back at the feedback loop. But as you already said, with short cycles and so on, you need to be aware that anything you measure will take a certain amount of time from the productive work of your people. You can have them document anything that they did the whole day, but they probably will do just documentation.
And they will hate you for making them do documentation that
that's another point. This also is another thing. There are certain things that you can really easily measure, like you are in the time frame of your project, in the budget frame of your project. We probably might come to that, how that actually technically works, because this is also interesting. But this is rather easy. There are certain things that are not so easily to track. And this is something called called the technical depth, of course. I don't know if you already talked about that, but technical depth is something that you carry from kind of project phase to project phase to project phase, because you didn't kind of refactor well, you didn't test well, and so on and so on. And these things actually will get you in the end. Yeah, and this is something that you actually can measure. It's a bit hard, but you can do that. And you can make something like a number out of that kind of helps you to see, okay, we in the last 3 project phases we acquired a lot of technical depth. We need to do something about that to be kind of in the same speed for next thing. And there is also something like the social depth. Yeah, imagine you rush to a deadline. We all experience that.
Yes.
Yeah, rushing to a deadline. Yeah, especially
happens every now and then.
Turning in your student projects and so on. And the last night.
That's what's called deadline-driven development,
yeah,
right?
Deadline-driven development. We all know that. But when you do that as a group, you have some kind of social debt. Because when you rush to the end of the deadline and you make it in the end, people probably worked overtime. Might have worked overtime. So your team is exhausted. And you just simply cannot start in the next day with something fresh and something new. Expect them to perform.
And I mean, it's not only a thing on a personal, on the individual level, but also on the team level, right?
Yes.
Because I mean, if you work under stress in a team, then you have conflict, then you have problem, and you need time to like even that out to get back to performing situation in your team, or sometimes even a norming situation.
Yeah.
So we have that the technical depth thing. I even experience in my small screencast series I do. I mean, I just have the ongoing episode about test driving the game loop, and in my last recording session, I figured out that I spent not enough time in actually caring about my tests. So I had such crude tests that I started breaking just by me developing further tests. So I spent a whole episode that will air on sometime, but only refactoring the tests, only get rid of this technical debt, because it kept me from working.
So did you measure your technical debt, or did it surprise you? Did it hit you by surprise?
Yeah, it somehow I saw it coming, and I mean it's a one-person project, so it's not like I have some process in place. I saw it coming that I will do an episode about getting rid of these technical problems I have in the tests. And so I deferred it to a point where I could cut the episode and start a new one. Okay. Maybe I would have tackled it earlier on if I had a normal project. But I mean, there's no formal process in place.
Sometimes
it's a one-person project, so it's kind of the management in my head thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it is like that you see the technical debt rolling into you like a very giant wave, like a tsunami and so on. And you see it, and you're totally aware of that. Can't do anything about that, because all of the constraints don't help you in kind of getting ready and build your dams up high or whatnot. It hits you. Sometimes it hits your heart, and you need to be at least aware of that.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything more to say about the control thing for now? I think we covered quite a bit.
I think we'll go into detail what certain special things, but this is kind of the basic thing that you need to know.
Okay. Then I think we covered our 4 activities and gave a broad overview of what's management for us in our view, and what we will and might cover in future episodes. Of course, if you are interested in certain topics, if you have your own ideas what we could talk about in the context of project management, just drop me a message or a comment, or contact me in any other way. Let me know. We're probably happy to talk about the things that people actually are interested in.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, and for now, I think we covered everything. I thank you very much for this first spontaneous episode.
I thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.